Ambassador Kim Soo-jin walked slowly through the grand corridors of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. Her black diplomatic uniform felt heavier than usual today. She carried a small silver box in her hands. Inside was humanity's diplomatic seal, the symbol that had represented Earth in galactic politics for over 200 years. The massive crystal doors opened before her with a soft hum. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their assigned seats. Some looked like giant insects with multiple eyes. Others were made of living rock that glowed with inner light. A few were just floating clouds of gas contained in special suits. All of them turned to look at her as she entered. Kim Soo-jin had given many speeches in this chamber over the past decade. She had helped end wars, create trade agreements, and solve disputes between species that had been fighting for centuries. Today would be different. Council Speaker Veltar, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, gestured for her to approach the center podium. The chamber fell silent. Even the usual whispers and electronic translations stopped. Something in her expression told everyone that this was not a normal diplomatic visit. She placed a silver box on the ancient stone podium that had stood at the center of galactic politics for 1,000 years. The box made a small click as it opened. Inside, the golden seal of Earth gleamed under the chamber's lights. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I stand before you today not to negotiate, not to mediate, and not to build bridges between our peoples." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces both familiar and strange. "I stand here to say goodbye." A ripple of confusion swept through the assembled aliens. The insect-like Zephyrians clicked their mandibles nervously. The rock beings of the crystalline hegemony glowed brighter with agitation. Even the gas-based ethereals swirled faster in their containment suits. The human coalition hereby withdraws from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately, Kim Soo-jin announced. Her words echoed off the crystal walls like thunder. "We are ending all trade agreements, closing our embassies, and recalling our citizens from every world in this galaxy." Speaker Veltar rose from his seat, his 4 arms spread wide in shock. "Ambassador Kim, surely this is a mistake. Humans have been our most trusted mediators for generations. What has happened? What have we done wrong?" Kim Soo-jin felt a pain in her chest, but her face remained calm. She had practiced this moment 100 times in private. She could not show weakness now. Too much depended on it. "This decision is final," she said simply. "Humanity withdraws from galactic affairs indefinitely. But the trade routes," shouted Representative Thekmore from the Manthari Empire. "The peace treaties, the economic agreements. Without human mediation, everything will fall apart." "The Zephyrian conflict," added another voice. "Who will keep us from war?" Kim Soo-jin closed the silver box with a soft snap. The sound seemed to echo forever in the suddenly quiet chamber. She tucked the box under her arm and looked one last time at the faces of beings she had worked with for years. Some had become friends. Others she respected despite their differences. All of them looked confused and afraid. "I am sorry," she whispered, though her voice carried clearly in the silence. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps were the only sound in the vast chamber. Behind her, representatives began shouting questions and demands, but she did not turn around. She could not turn around. As the crystal doors closed behind her, Kim Soo-jin allowed herself one tear. Then she pressed a small communication device on her wrist. "This is Ambassador Kim," she said quietly. "The message has been delivered. Begin the evacuation." Across the galaxy, human embassies received the coded signal. Within hours, every human diplomat packed their belongings and left their posts. Trade ships in deep space changed course for home. Human colonies that had existed for decades began shutting down their operations. Captain Park Min-soo commanded the merchant fleet in the Outer Rim territories. When he received the withdrawal order, he immediately broadcast to all human vessels. "All ships, this is Admiral Park. Operation Homecoming is now active. Return to Sol System immediately. Do not answer any alien communications. Do not explain our departure. Just come home. The massive human merchant fleet, thousands of ships strong, began its journey back to Earth. Behind them, they left empty space stations, abandoned trade posts, and confused alien partners who depended on human goods for generations. On dozens of worlds, alien leaders tried desperately to contact their human friends and partners. They found only empty buildings and automated messages. Humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs indefinitely. Within 72 hours, it was as if humans had never existed outside their home solar system. 2 centuries of careful diplomacy, trade, and friendship simply vanished. In the Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime, Speaker Veltar stared at the empty spot where Kim Soo-jin had stood. For the first time in his long life, he felt truly afraid. Without humans to mediate disputes and maintain balance, how long would galactic civilization last? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. 3 days after humanity's withdrawal, Commander Lee Hanna stood on the observation deck of the last human evacuation ship, leaving the Outer Rim. Through the massive windows, she watched alien vessels already moving toward the abandoned human trading posts like scavengers picking over bones. Her communication officer, Lieutenant Park Jin-soo, approached with a worried expression. "Commander, we're receiving hundreds of distress calls from across the sector. The Zephyrians and Manthari are mobilizing their fleets." Lee Hanna nodded grimly. She had expected this. For over 50 years, humans had maintained a delicate peace between the 2 warlike species through careful negotiation and strategic positioning of human bases along their shared border. Now those bases were empty. "How long do you think the ceasefire will last?" Park Jin-soo asked. "It already ended," Lee Hanna replied, pointing toward a cluster of ships in the distance. Red and blue energy beams were already flashing between Zephyrian and Manthari vessels. Without our peacekeeping stations, they have no neutral ground for communication. The evacuation ship jumped to hyperspace just as the first explosions lit up the darkness behind them. On the other side of the galaxy, Director Choi Woo-bin watched the screens with growing horror. The Terminus Station Financial Exchange, the economic heart of galactic trade, was in complete chaos. Numbers flashed red across every display as market values crashed. "The galactic credit has lost 40% of its value in 3 days," his assistant analyst Kim Yuri reported with shaking voice. "All major trading partnerships are dissolving without human guarantees." Choi Woo-bin rubbed his tired eyes. Humans had backed the galactic currency with their massive industrial capacity and reliable trade networks. They had guaranteed billions of credits worth of transactions between species that didn't trust each other. Now that guarantee was gone. "Sir, the Altrian Banking Consortium is demanding immediate payment of their outstanding loans." Kim Yuri continued. "They say without human economic backing, they cannot trust other species to pay." "And the others?" "The same. Everyone wants their money now, before the system collapses completely." Choi Woo-bin looked out at the bustling station around him. Terminus had been built by humans as a neutral meeting place for galactic commerce. Thousands of alien traders had made their fortunes here, buying and selling goods between species that would never deal with each other directly. Now panic was spreading to the crowds like wildfire. "Pack everything," he told Kim Yuri. "We're going home before this place becomes a war zone." In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, Speaker Veltar tried desperately to maintain order. Representatives shouted at each other in dozens of languages, while their translation devices struggled to keep up. The crystalline hegemony refuses to recognize any agreements made with carbon-based life forms, declared Ambassador Silrek, his rock body glowing bright orange with anger. "Without human mediation, we will only deal with other silicon-based species." "That is unacceptable," roared General Thakmor of the Manthari Empire. "The mining rights to the Kepler Nebula were established through human negotiation. Those contracts must be honored." "Honored by whom?" Silrek shot back. "The humans are gone. Their guarantees are meaningless." Veltar raised all 4 of his arms for silence, but the arguing continued. The hive minds withdrew into their shells and refused to participate. The ethereal collective announced they would only communicate through their traditional spirit mediums, a process that took weeks for simple messages. Ancient prejudices that had been carefully managed for generations erupted into the open. Species that had worked together for decades suddenly remembered why their ancestors had fought wars. Without human diplomacy to bridge cultural gaps and translate not just language but intent and custom, every conversation became a potential conflict. Dr. Song Ji-won, the galaxy's leading expert on human behavior, found himself suddenly the most wanted individual in known space. Every government and major corporation wanted to hire him to explain what had happened. He sat in his small office on the academic world of Minerva, surrounded by stacks of research files and communication devices that hadn't stopped ringing for days. His assistant, Professor Nam Hyojin, brought him his 15th cup of coffee that day. The Veloxian Assembly is offering 50 million credits for a full analysis of human psychology, she reported. The Trade Federation doubled their offer to 100 million. They all want to know the same thing. Why did humans abandon us? Dr. Song looked at the data he had collected over the past weeks. Human behavior in the months before the withdrawal showed some unusual patterns. Increased military research funding, massive stockpiling of raw materials, secret construction projects in deep space. Most tellingly, human diplomats have been quietly resolving as many conflicts as possible, as they're trying to leave the galaxy in the most stable condition they could manage. They weren't abandoning us, he said quietly. They were preparing for something else. Something big enough to make them sacrifice 2 centuries of galactic relationships. Preparing for what? Before Dr. Song could answer, his communication device chimed with an emergency alert. Both professors looked at the screen in shock. Long-range sensors at the galaxy's edge had detected massive gravitational anomalies approaching from intergalactic space. Something was coming. Something so large it bent space-time around itself. For the first time since humanity's withdrawal, Dr. Song felt afraid. Intelligence Officer Yoon Jae-woo adjusted the controls of her cloaked reconnaissance ship as it drifted silently at the edge of Sol System. She had been watching the mysterious energy barrier for 3 weeks now, and it still made no sense. "Any changes in the readings?" asked her partner, Lieutenant Oh Sungmin, from the sensor station. "Nothing," Yoon Jae-woo replied, studying the swirling patterns of energy that surrounded Earth's entire solar system. "It's like they built a wall around their whole home. I've never seen technology like this." The barrier pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist. Deep purples and golden lights that seemed to bend space around them. Sometimes shapes moved within the energy field, but they were too distorted to identify. Whatever humans were doing inside their protected space, they didn't want anyone to see. "Ma'am, I'm picking up something strange," Oh Sungmin said, his voice tense. "There are massive energy spikes coming from inside the barrier, like they're building something really big." Yoon Jae-woo leaned over to look at his screen. The energy readings were enormous, bigger than anything she had seen before. "Keep recording everything. Command needs to see this." On the other side of the galaxy, Master Cryptographer Kong Haiji worked late into the night in her laboratory on the Veloxian homeworld. Around her, dozens of computer screens display fragments of intercepted human communications from before the withdrawal. "Computer, play message fragment 17 again," she commanded. A crackling voice filled the room. "Project Sanctuary Phase 3 complete. Resource allocation for deep space construction increased by 400%. Timeline moved up to..." The message cut off in static. Kong Haiji rubbed her tired eyes. She had been trying to decode these fragments for weeks, but the humans had used encryption methods that seemed impossible to break. Her assistant, Junior Cryptographer Lim Seung, brought her another cup of tea. "Any luck with the newer fragments?" "Some," Kong Haiji replied, pointing to one of the screens. "They keep mentioning coordinates beyond the galactic rim, and something called the approaching darkness. It sounds almost scared." Lim Soo-young frowned. "Scared? Humans aren't afraid of anything. They're the ones who always stayed calm during crises. That's what worries me," Kong Haiji said quietly. "If humans are scared, what should the rest of us be?" Dr. Song Ji-won stood before a room full of desperate alien officials on the neutral world of Concord Station. Representatives from 12 major species had gathered to hear his analysis of human behavior patterns. The evidence is clear, he began, projecting holographic charts above the conference table. In the 6 months before their withdrawal, humans increased their military spending by 800%. They purchased massive amounts of rare metals and energy crystals, far more than they needed for normal operations. Ambassador Veltar leaned forward. But why the secrecy? Humans always shared their technology with us before. Dr. Song switched to another chart showing human diplomatic activity. Look at this pattern. In their final months, human diplomats worked overtime to resolve every major conflict they could find. The Alterian-Zephyrian trade dispute that had lasted 50 years, solved in 2 weeks. The territorial disagreements in the outer spiral settled in a month. They were cleaning up, whispered Representative Silrek of the Crystalline Hegemony. Like someone preparing to leave. Or like someone preparing for war, Dr. Song said grimly. But not war against us. Every action suggests they were trying to leave the galaxy in the most peaceful state possible. Professor Nam Hyojin, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, suddenly gasped. Dr. Song, you need to see this. She projected new information above the table. I've been studying human archaeological expeditions from the past year. They sent research teams to dead civilizations in the galactic rim, places that have been abandoned for thousands of years. The room fell silent as images of ancient ruins appeared in the hologram, massive structures that looked like weapons or shields, all pointing outward toward intergalactic space. These civilizations, Nam Hyojin continued, they all died out at roughly the same time, about 5,000 years ago. And according to their remaining records, they were preparing for something coming from outside our galaxy. In another part of the galaxy, researcher Im Daeung carefully explored the abandoned human research station on the remote world of Kepler-7. The facility had been evacuated so quickly that equipment was still running, and computers were still active. "Hello," she called out as she walked through the empty corridors. "Anyone here?" Only silence answered her. She made her way to the main computer terminal and began downloading files. Most were encrypted or corrupted, but some fragments remained readable. One file made her blood run cold. It was a star map showing gravitational anomalies beyond a galactic edge, massive disturbances moving toward their galaxy at incredible speed. The file was dated 6 months before humanity's withdrawal. Another file contained calculations about military fleet sizes and weapon capabilities. The numbers were staggering. According to human estimates, whatever was approaching would arrive with millions of ships. At the bottom of the file, someone had written a simple note. Conventional defense impossible. Alternative solutions required. Evacuation and isolation protocols approved. May the universe forgive us for what we must do. Im Daeung's hands shook as she copied the files. She finally understood why humans had disappeared. They hadn't abandoned the galaxy out of anger or fear. They had withdrawn to prepare for something that was coming. Something so terrible that they chose to face it alone rather than watch the galaxy tear itself apart in panic. As she prepared to leave the station, her long-range sensors detected something at the edge of galactic space. Massive shapes were moving in the darkness between galaxies, still too far away to see clearly, but getting closer every day. The humans had been right. Something was coming. The galaxy burned as Admiral Bae Si-hoon watched from his hidden observation post in the asteroid belt of the Vega system. Through his ship's powerful telescopes, he could see the flashing lights of battles raging across 3 different star systems simultaneously. "Sir, the Manthari Empire just launched their full fleet against the Zephyrian colonies," reported his communications officer, Ensign Jung Mi-ho. "That's over 10,000 warships." Bae Si-hoon closed his eyes in pain. He had served as a human military advisor in that region for 15 years. He knew both species well. They were not evil, just proud and stubborn. Without human mediators to help them communicate, their old fears and hatred had exploded into total war. "Any word from the Trade Federation?" he asked. "They collapsed yesterday, sir. The member species are hoarding all resources for their own defense. No one trusts anyone anymore." The Admiral looked at reports flooding in from across the galaxy. The crystalline hegemony had sealed their borders and declared war on all carbon-based life forms. The ethereal collective had retreated into their gas clouds and refused all communication. Even peaceful species like the Veloxians were building weapons as fast as they could. 200 years of careful diplomacy, destroyed in just 4 months. On the research world of Minerva, Dr. Mdean worked frantically in the abandoned Human Archaeological Center. She had been studying the data from Kepler-7 for weeks, and each new discovery was more terrifying than the last. "Professor Shin Sunho, you need to see this," she called her elderly mentor, who was examining star charts at another workstation. The old scientist hurried over to her computer screen. "What did you find?" Daeung pointed to a series of mathematical calculations. "These are human projections about the invasion force. According to their deep space sensors, we're facing over 200 million ships." Professor Shin Sunho's face went pale. "That's impossible. There aren't that many ships in our entire galaxy." "That's not the worst part," Daeung continued, her voice shaking. "Look at this energy analysis. Each of their ships produces more power than our largest space stations. And this..." She pointed to another section. "These are weapon signatures. They can destroy entire planets with single shots." The professor sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "How long do we have?" Daeung checked the timeline calculations. "The leading edge of their fleet will reach our galaxy in approximately 6 months. The main force will arrive 2 months after that." As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the research facility. Both scientists ran to the long-range sensor array. On the main display screen, dots of light were moving at the very edge of galactic space. "Scout ships," Professor Shin whispered. "They're already here." In the ruins of what used to be the Galactic Council, Speaker Veltar tried desperately to organize some kind of unified defense. Only 12 species had responded to his emergency call, and most of them were too busy fighting each other to listen. "We must work together," he pleaded with the assembled representatives. "Whatever destroyed the ancient civilizations 5,000 years ago is coming back. We need to combine our fleets, and..." "Why should we trust you?" interrupted General Thakmor of the Manthari Empire, his uniform scorched from recent battles. "The Zephyrians attacked our mining colonies without warning. We have no time for unity when we're fighting for survival." "Because you're fighting the wrong enemy," Veltar shouted, his forearms spread wide in frustration. "Don't you understand? The humans knew this was coming. That's why they left. They were trying to prepare while we still had time." Ambassador Silrek of the Crystalline Hegemony laughed bitterly. "The humans abandoned us when we needed them most. If they knew about this threat, why didn't they warn us?" Veltar pulled up the decoded human messages that Dr. Song Ji-won had finally managed to translate. "Because they knew this would happen," he said, gesturing to the chaos around them. "They knew we would panic and destroy ourselves before the real enemy arrived. They chose to prepare in secret rather than watch the galaxy tear itself apart." The room fell silent as the representatives read the human documents. Phrases like "preserve galactic stability until final moment" and "sacrifice diplomatic relations to buy time for weapon development" painted a picture of impossible choices made in desperate circumstances. "They weren't cowards," Veltar continued. "They were trying to save us all." Young Captain Ko Sungmin commanded one of the last functional deep space monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge. For days, his sensors had been detecting more and more movement in the darkness between galaxies. Now, as he watched his screens, the first clear images were coming through. "Sir," his sensor operator, Lieutenant Han Jiang, called out in a voice filled with terror. "You need to see this." The main screen displayed a sight that defied comprehension. Ships the size of small moons moved in perfect formation through space. Behind them, millions more vessels stretched beyond the range of their sensors. The fleet was so massive it created its own gravitational field, bending starlight around it. "Send this data to every remaining government in the galaxy," Ko Sungmin ordered, his voice barely steady. "Everyone needs to see what's coming." As the transmission spread across the galaxy, the surviving leaders finally understood the true scope of the threat they faced. Species that had been at war with each other just hours before suddenly realized how small their conflicts really were. The extragalactic invasion had begun, and they were completely unprepared. The energy barrier around Sol system flickered once, twice, then vanished completely. For the first time in 8 months, Earth's solar system was visible to the outside galaxy. What emerged from that protected space was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Ryu Miho stood on the bridge of the flagship Defender, watching as his transformed fleet took positions at the galaxy's edge. These were not the familiar diplomatic vessels that had once carried human ambassadors to peaceful negotiations. These ships seemed to bend reality around them, their hulls shifting between dimensions, their weapons crackling with energies that made space itself ripple. "Admiral, all battle groups are in position," reported Captain Omin-J from the communication station. "The invasion fleet has breached the galactic rim. Contact in 30 minutes. Ryu Miho nodded and activated the galaxy-wide transmission system. His message would reach every surviving government, every refugee fleet, every hidden colony still fighting for survival. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his voice carrying across thousands of light years. "This is Admiral Ryu Miho of the Human Defense Fleet. We know you have questions. We know you feel abandoned. We know some of you hate us for leaving when you needed us most." On the war-torn world of Zephyria, Commander Velka paused in loading ammunition to listen to the transmission. Around him, his soldiers stopped their desperate preparations to hear the words of the species that had vanished 8 months ago. "We withdrew not in abandonment, but in preparation," the human admiral continued. "We chose isolation over panic, sacrifice over false hope. While you fought each other, we fought impossibility itself." In the refugee camps on Alteria Prime, millions of displaced aliens gathered around communication screens. Many wept as they heard the familiar, calm confidence of human voices, the same tone that had guided them through countless crises in the past. Every human colony abandoned, every trade agreement broken, every friend left behind, Admiral Ryu said, his voice heavy with emotion. "These sacrifices purchased time to prepare for this moment. We cannot save our relationships, but we prayed we could save your lives." Dr. Song Ji-won watched from his laboratory on Minerva as human ships moved into defensive positions. But these vessels defied everything he knew about technology. Some seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Others appeared to be built from crystallized space-time itself. "How is this possible?" whispered his assistant, Professor Nam Hyejin. "What did they do in 8 months that took us centuries to develop?" Captain Lee Soyeon commanded the advanced scout wing as it moved to intercept the first wave of extragalactic invaders. Her ship, the Guardian, had been rebuilt with technology that human scientists had developed by sacrificing everything else they cared about. "All units, this is Captain Lee," she broadcast to her squadron. "Remember, we're not fighting for humanity alone anymore. We're fighting for every species that called us friend, and even those who call us enemy." The extragalactic invasion fleet was a sight that would haunt nightmares for generations. Ships the size of cities moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing all light. Behind them came vessels that looked like living creatures, pulsing with malevolent energy. The entire force numbered in the hundreds of millions. But as they approached the galaxy's edge, something impossible happened. The human fleet, numbering only in the thousands, began to multiply. Each ship seemed to split into dozens of copies, then hundreds. Reality twisted and warped as human vessels appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "What are they doing?" gasped General Thakmore from his command bunker on the Manthari homeworld. "How can so few ships create so many?" Dr. Mdaeung, still monitoring from her research station, understood first. "They're not creating copies," she breathed. "They're pulling their ships from alternate timelines. They've learned to fight across multiple realities at once." The first exchange of fire lit up the cosmic void with colors that had no names. Extragalactic weapons that could shatter planets struck human shields that existed in 11 dimensions. The invaders' overwhelming numbers crashed against defensive systems that drew power from the quantum fabric of space itself. Admiral Ryu Miho watched as his impossible gamble began to work. "All units, execute Protocol Unity," he commanded. Across the galaxy, every human ship, from the smallest scout to the largest battleship, began broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. But this was not a message of words. It was pure data, flowing directly into computer systems of every alien vessel still capable of receiving it. Captain Park Tae-hyun, monitoring communications from the second battle line, smiled as he saw alien ships across the galaxy suddenly powering up with new capabilities. Sir, they're accepting the technology transfers. The Zephyrian fleet just increased their firepower by 200%. The Alterian Defense Force is reporting shield systems they've never seen before. What are you giving them? Asked Captain Ominje, amazed. Admiral Ryu looked out at the battle raging at the galaxy's edge, where human and alien forces now fought side by side with weapons that seemed like magic. Everything, he said simply. Every secret we learned, every breakthrough we made, every advantage we bought with 8 months of isolation. We're giving it all away, because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. The real battle for galactic survival had begun, and for the first time in months, the galaxy fought as one.